Welcome to the Great Things LLC Podcast, the show that celebrates people who are making an impact on the world, people creating conscious businesses that are in alignment with their own personal values. Each episode shares the wisdom, experience, and the intentions of those that are following their dreams. Visionaries who have chosen a different path, found their purpose, and create joy and abundance while helping others. Whether you're already a trailblazer or still searching for your path, these stories will inspire you towards being the best version of yourself. Welcome to the Great Things LLC Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Meeder, and today I am excited to introduce Frankie Rollins. Frankie has a lot of things behind her names, but she is, formerly from academia in college professorship. She is an author, she is a writing coach, she is an entrepreneur, and just really enjoyed getting to meet Frankie. So let's jump right into this. And Frankie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, so you and I met actually on a workshop of all things on different platform about marketing, but did feel the connection there, and I'm really glad we were able to get together and kind of share your story. Now, like I said, you've been an author and academic. You have just a couple books to name those. There's The Grief Manuscript, Running Wild, The Sin Eater, and Other Stories. And your most recent one, which we'll get to, is Do You Feel Like Writing? A Creative Guide to Artistic. Do you feel like writing a creative guide to artistic confidence? So I guess to start this story, we have to rewind the world clock a little bit we'll go back before the pandemic. So, Frank, why don't you just kind of start with where you were and how this whole Fifth Brain Creative Collective, your business, came into focus there.
Great. I'd love to rewind the world's clock. I actually look at time from every direction as a life force. So I am in at the beginning of 2020. I am living in Tucson, Arizona. I'm teaching at a community college. I'm teaching 5 classes in creative writing and honors. And the pandemic hits, and I've been divorced. I've been divorced a few years, and I'm starting to come out of my shell, my shell shock divorce state. And so I'm thinking that my life is opening up, and then my cat dies, and then the pandemic strikes. And what happened then, I lived across the street from a hospital. So the first summer, it is helicopters overhead day and night. There's no escaping the reality. And simultaneously, my house is kind of isolated. I have a neighbor, but it's hot. It's hot. It's such a hot summer. 9 p.m. at night, it's still 110 degrees. And so it's very hard to communicate with people. Even 12 feet apart, we have to have bowls of ice water for our feet. It's a dark moment. And my computer, I moved to teaching fully online, and my computer is full of the creative writing of people in pain, because everybody's in pain, right? The whole world was in pain. And so it was just a daily dose of massive pain. Even the writing that they were doing, I had so many people writing for the first time of assaults that they'd lived through or abuse that they'd lived through. And at this time, and I'm single, and so there's a lot of hardcore solitude. 7:30 in the evening, you're like, oh, no, really? So many more hours to entertain myself? And during this time, also my neighbor died because he was afraid to go across the street to the hospital. He had a heart condition, but he was so terrified of getting COVID that he's that kind of COVID victim. And I was texting him, urging him to go to the hospital. He finally called an ambulance, and I was writing him encouraging notes, and he died in that. And then I saw people chopping down his door. It was just a little too much of everything.
Yeah, I mean, going back there, not that anyone really chooses to go back there, but during that time, you're right, it was such a unprecedented time. And the alienation and the separation, where literally the only human contact you had was what you brought in through your computer. And you had to watch that or your devices because, it was apocalyptic from the news cycle.
Yes.
And then it was fear-based from everyone else because there was so much unknown. So
Yes.
you're right. So you're in academia and teaching, and your students are feeling all of this plus just the general anxiety of the younger generation. So you were seeing a lot of the pain and the suffering that people were coming with. So how was that? Because it's one thing to be the teacher or to be the instructor, but that still has to hit and weasel through your soul, whether you have some protection up or not.
Oh, yes. And I mean, really, there's no protection because we were all so frightened and alarmed by it. I actually had a feeling, or I had constantly had this elevator that wouldn't hit bottom. But the other thing that was really interesting for me as a teacher is I thought, you could see the lives of young people changing. I mean, we never went to school on Zoom and in a pandemic, right? And so I couldn't shake the feeling that we were suddenly teaching the wrong things. I mean, not in writing, writing will always be what it is, but in other elements of school, I was like, how could we possibly be teaching the right thing for a whole generation of children that is having an experience we know nothing about? As their elders, we're almost destined to fail them. And that part of that is part of why I decided to leave academia, because academia is such a rigid structure. It can't flex and bend for the future necessarily. It takes, years to make change. And I also, seeing the Zoom manifest in our lives, just this wasn't a thing in our lives. With Skype, right? Or FaceTime, but not this full life. And I realized at the time that I needed to take my work with writers, with creative writers, and take it out of the institution into a more flexible realm where I could really speak to what people would need after the pandemic. Because I changed so much in that time period. I knew I'm just one other human. I knew that other people were manifesting massive changes in themselves that they might not even be able to articulate, and for a long time, I still don't think we know, what has changed inside of us.
It is. And, one of the things I just heard you say that I really liked and resonated with was that we are teaching the students, in this case, the wrong things. In academia, you were teaching format and it's XYZ, it's formulaic. But in our conversations was actually what is needed in the teaching, whether it be through creative writing or even from my standpoint in conscious business consulting, is the stuff that is geared more towards healing the self, healing the community, healing the planet, where the efforts that we put in are a force for good and for healing. So
Yes.
you saw that coming up, and so let's go down that path on, okay, now you've seen the suffering, but there's something you actually want to do with it.
Yes. So I've been in a writing group with these two other people, Sandra Shattuck and Eric Aldrich, for many years. And we had created such a world where our writing would flourish in community, in conversation. And I realized through that and through my teaching, the conversation and support is the essence of helping each other be creative. And creativity absolutely heals the soul. Just hands down, it does. It's an amazing tool for that. And so we had been talking about it, and I thought that's what I'm going to pursue in my life, is helping people through one-on-one coaching, through conversation, having a membership, having classes outside of academia, where the love of the experience of living is the actual material that we're working with there, whether they're writing nonfiction or fiction, just learning how to translate your human experience into this art form and then learning from it.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And I love following the passion that you have to see in others. What I love to see is the passion that you had. So there's a choice point that you had in that. Was there a clarity? Was there a moment when you're like, I am done. I can no longer, like, I just can't stay here. I have to move forward. And what was that that decision point for you to take that leap and get started in a new business?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I really had a moment where I I was so far from delight. It was so hard to find delight. And I remembered, I knew somewhere inside myself, because I have a theory called the fifth brain, where there's a part of our brain always working on our behalf, always gathering information. And I realized that whenever I would go to Fort Collins, Colorado, where my sister and her family lived, that I felt the closest thing to delight that I had left. And so I realized I had to move there. And then my institution wouldn't allow me to keep my job to do that. So I was like, great, I need to be cut off from those golden handcuffs anyways, because I want to, I mean, also, this is the other thing about the pandemic. I was like, oh, we have no guarantees. What do I want to spend the rest of my life doing? You know, I'm in the middle of my life. I am not wasting another second on a meaningless meeting. That is not what I'm doing with my life. And so I decided to launch my Fifth Brain Collective, because I also believe, sort of as you gestured at earlier, that the more people have access to their true thoughts, their authentic selves, their creativity, the more solutions that they'll be able to come up with for the problems that we have right now. We have such a serious set of problems, and we need people to be so creative and to be so in touch with themselves, so that they're better community members, they're happier humans, they know how to work collaboratively. And so that's sort of the essence of what I was trying to do.
Well, we do need more of that, both the ability to creatively express oneself and the ability to openly receive it
Yes,
without reaction.
right.
So a lot
Yeah.
going on there. And the Fifth Brain Collective. Let's go to the genesis of that. Now you've made the call. You've ended the security of the job, and you're making these transitions. You just dove in. You took a course. How did this come about?
So, it is so it is, I did it the hard way. I do everything the hard way. That's kind of how I learned. I first learned on a manual car, and I still drive one because I don't know why. But I just leapt in. You know what? The thing is, my fifth brain knew that what I am here on earth to do is to support people in their creative writing.
Mhm.
I just have always known that. And so I just kind of thought, you know what? The world is no guarantees. I'm just going to go with plan A and pretend there's no possibility of a plan B. And so I took a class in business and marketing and entrepreneurship, and I've been taking them really for a year. It's been a year since I started this. And I started on the same day I self-published a book, Do You Feel Like Writing? And I opened a set of classes and started my online coaching, one-on-one coaching, all at the same time, like a total maniac. And so, but I also, the wonderful thing about that was I made so many mistakes, but I learned again and again that that's not the point. Perfectionism is not the goal. And that being out there with my loving, radiant message, truly, I just really care about the humans, that is what really matters here.
It
And
is, and thank
it
you for
really
sharing that
is.
because that is actually something that you've nailed in the description, and I'll just use the replay because it was perfectly said. But when people ask about starting business, that's what we do here at Great Things, and it's the same thing. There's the fear, there's the anxiety, and the way to really do it is just to do it and
Yeah,
learn. And the perfectionism is the greatest killer of any success out there. So
yeah,
I know we're going to dive into those topics in a little bit because I'm sure that does come up for the students. You know, and so now you've had all this experience of helping students write. So you've seen for 10, 15 years the blocks and the challenges and all the things. So it's not new to you as
no.
to what's doing. Let's talk about those first couple students and that first, those first wave coming in and currently how's your operation and your business is going now, and how do you work with students? What are you seeing out there that they are succeeding with and are really challenged with?
Well, one of the things that's been so incredible is watching. I mean, I have a student who had never written before. She actually was looking for a culinary class at my former college, and someone said, actually, it sounds like you have a big story. It's a very dark, difficult story she's telling. And they sent her to me, and she was deep in trauma when I met her. And I just said, let's just try writing. Let me just give you some prompts. Let me just work through this with you. And now it's been a year and some months later. This person is writing a very sophisticated braided essay that has three parts: a factual part, a fictional part, and then a creative nonfiction part from her story. And she is healing herself. She is giving herself a voice in a story where she had no voice. And it is the most astonishing thing to watch her. We also, in another client who I've been working with for multiple years, actually a former student of mine who followed me into the Fifth Brain Collective, and he just published his first piece of writing nationally after being agoraphobic for 8 years, living at one point in his life, he lived in a room, basically stayed in his room for 8 years. And he just published his first short story in a national magazine. And it's so, it's really, they are also releasing the perfectionism, because what we do is we just talk about what we want to say and how to best say it. And we forget about gatekeepers. We don't let other editors be in the room with us. We allow and honor our own ideas first. And the results are just profound. I mean, those are two supreme examples, but there are just so many people writing in freedom without the sense of some ogre over them ready to condemn them as good or bad. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for them to find their voices. It's so exciting. It's just thrilling. And to be able to bear witness to these births that they're creating for themselves is such a privilege.
Yeah. The permission, we've talked some things, you and I, on permission and allowing people to have that freedom to explore, to fail, or to learn about themselves, and allow, like, the healing happens to just come out naturally because you're removing those blocks.
Yeah.
What are some of the impediments that you're seeing that people, as they're coming in, are bringing that are common?
Oh, it's always fear. It's fear, different kinds of fear. Imposter syndrome. How could I possibly be a writer? I mean, people genuinely don't understand that what it is to be a writer is to just write and take it seriously, think that it matters, And so that imposter syndrome is pretty severe. And also a fear of being selfish. Why do I have the right to spend my time in my brain thinking? They don't understand what a boon that is to the rest of us if they do that. The more people think, the more they understand, the more they can reflect, the more they can see the world, from a clear perspective that is not necessarily biased in some, institutionalized way. And they get to have their own opinion. And so that selfishness is a really hard nut to crack. And mostly, I think that one is easiest to crack just by modeling. I mean, I just constantly point to these bookshelves and I'm like, do you think somebody gave all these people permission to write?
Yeah.
Like, did somebody tell David Bowie, it's okay, go ahead and write a song about red shoes? I mean, we forget that these are that are heroes in different kinds of writing, both musical or, literary or television wise, movies, films, that it's that they just chose to do it. They wanted to write something. They had an idea and they just had enough courage or permission for themselves to write it.
Yeah. Yeah, the true greats never created for the commercial success. The true greats created because they had to get it outside of
Yeah,
themselves.
there was something they had to say.
Hmm. And the selfishness, just interesting correlations and crossover, because that is pretty pervasive. We're taught here to be humble and to be charitable, and all we should be, but the selfishness, like to actually, it's really self-enrichment or self-care
Yes.
is so demonized, like, oh, you're being selfish. But people have to understand is like, unless you're full yourself, you can't support and you can't give in fullness to others. So it's interesting to see the crossovers that you have from a writing perspective, and these same things ring true with those starting in on the entrepreneurial side. So you've kind of got them both wrapped up there.
Yeah.
Um, then the book that let's talk just a little bit about, like, the Do You Feel Like Writing? So that's coming out there, and is that a core part of your class, or is it just one of those things that had to get out?
It is, it's a core part. You know what? I will say writing this book changed me. Writing every book that I write changes me as a human being. But this book was really, I was, because I actually have been teaching for 25 years. I had my own little class of classes for 9 years, and I was a teaching artist in the schools in creative writing for years. But so it was gathering the essences that I knew were true. And what I did in this book is there's a lot of my own story as a writer there, because one of the things I'm famous for in my friend circles is that I always write no matter what. It doesn't matter how hard my life is, how many jobs I have, or whatever. I find time to write because it is such an essential part of me. So I use stories from that to illustrate moments of turning in my life. And but I talk about things like, honoring your knowledge banks, that each of us has a set of knowledge banks that we've been gathering our whole lives, and using those in your writing. So you're never actually coming to a blank page. And but the book also has over 100 prompts in it. So it's really meant to just let people start anywhere and just do some writing, and I remind them constantly in the book that they have the choice to do this, that it's totally up to them and they have permission. And it's once it's on the shelf, it really, people find it, and then they write to me and they're like, I really needed this book. Because it's not, I mean, I just was looking at an old textbook that I had, I mean, not a textbook, but an old book I had. I'm not even saying the name because I don't want people to go get it. And this, some of the advice in it is so pejorative. I mean, it mocks people for different choices they're making. And that is what I am like, that is not the way to teach. That is not the way for us to go
Yeah.
forward, you know.
For those sitting out there that right now do not realize that they are a writer, but they have
Yeah,
a story or they have an idea that's percolating, how do you reach those people, and what should they be considering to
I love
get
that
that next step?
question. Yeah, I have a free consult always, and I almost get everything I know from that conversation, everything I need to know. For example, people will sometimes, I'll just say, do you have some chapters in mind? And often they'll be like, yeah, I do. And I'll just say, well, write that list down and then put a sentence underneath for each one. Or do you know something you want to say about life or experience? Just, write that idea down and then think about a story from your life that might exemplify that. I'm just, I'm working on a collection of fairy tales right now. And it's called The Empty House, Fairy Tales for Disappointed Women. And I turn moments of disappointment from my own life into fairy tales where the women might morph into a wolf. Or one woman's so angry and she can't deal with it and she can't talk about it and she just blasts apart. She's still alive, but her arms over there and her legs over there. But it's morphing your experience into a fictional tale can be really helpful to see it, or even just writing down literally what happened to you can help you learn more, see more. And it's an offering. I mean, we need each other's experiences to know how to live our lives.
Mhm. I think one of the key points in there is the process, not the outcome. Like when people are thinking about starting a business, starting a book, if you can focus on the process and the healing from it, not the outcome, is that
Yes,
the same in your
yes.
world? Because the outcome puts an unnecessary, unrealistic pressure that you're trying to get to, and I think it pulls you out of the process to get there.
Exactly. Exactly. There's a lot of writing. gathering, there's a lot of writing businesses now that promise write the book and publish the book. But I'm always like, why are we letting the publishers in the room of creation at all? That, like, how do you speak of what's in your own marrow if you're worried about a bunch of strangers who might or might not like your work? You can't. You have to go more deeply inside to know what you're saying. And I mean, of course, there are certain writers who, they're like a mystery writer who's writing a whole series that all have sort of the same premise or something. That's sort of different. But if you're trying to write something that you need to say in the world, then you have to be able to dig inside. And it's so important to just pay attention to that and love it. Allow yourself to love it. The other thing is we turn everything into work, right? It's like productivity. we must sit in our chair and check off our lists. And that is an inappropriate approach to creativity, because the fifth brain has it's an organic creature coming from this organic creature. So it's going to have its own, highs and lows and cyclical nature, times when it needs to rest, times when it's pouring ideas forth. And so learning to be patient with that is such an element of the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, to take that in play, not necessarily devil's advocate, but to challenge it from the other side, right? Because there is the freedom and the creativity and the flow state and lack of boundaries or the hard regimen. But there's also the place of effort versus like hoping for manifestation and actually directing. So how do you pull the balance of keeping it in a natural flow state for the creative process, but also there is the component of effort and challenge.
Yes, keep it. Yes, trying when it gets hard, because it does get difficult. I mean, there is a moment when, and a friend and I, just talk about, is your butt in your chair? Like because also writing, you have to generally be sitting down doing it. And so there is that element, like the idea is amazing. The idea can be so sparkly and exciting, and then you have to follow through. And part of the thing I'm saying, because I've met some people who were pouring out novels, but they didn't necessarily know craft technique. And now as they're learning craft technique, it's slowing down their work, and they're finding that here's how you get the work done. The reason why you can get the work done is because you are learning so much as you're doing it. It's not just for the product. It's for your own development as a human being too. Well, like you don't even mean to when you start out, but it happens. And I think that the love of that, the curiosity of that is what can help drive the work there. And obviously there's also a point where it has to be polished and crafted. And I just always say, there are a million people out there ready to like nip and bite and help you with that. They're all there. There's plenty of them. There's fewer of us.
Yeah, there's never a shortage of critics out there,
yes,
so they
exactly.
can always give us their constructive advice at the end.
Exactly. You could go find them. They're there.
Yeah. Like I always say, you can get on my train or you can get run over. It doesn't matter to me. We'll just leave those people under the tracks back there. Looking forward, what is on the horizon for you and for Fifth Brain Collective?
That is something that I'm obsessed with right now, because it's been the first year. As I said, I've made a lot of mistakes, and now and there were mistakes I could never have known ahead of time. I had to make them to know them, or I had to do the thing to even understand. So I'm sort of reshaping. I had a lot of poetic titles for my classes, which was a mistake because people don't know what they are. So that was something I learned. So I'm doing some reshaping of it, but I'm creating I have a membership where those people are writing and supporting each other. I'm creating a new one of those. And it's really expanding a little bit is what is next. But it's just now that I know, I've proven my concept that conversation, collaboration, and weekly support with other people is what we need to get our creative writing done. Now I'm creating things in the Fifth Brain Collective that are really meant to promote that in this world. So that's the work there. And I mean, here's the other key that is amazing about this is that I myself am I'm working on 3 stories now and a new novel while I'm running this business, right? It's like, if you're doing the thing that you most love to do, other things start to fall into that like aura that you've created. And it's profound.
It is. I think on the flip side of that, when you're not working in your passion or in your flow, it is hard just to get 4 things checked off your checklist because it's a grind to get through that.
Right. Yes. It's all work. It's all productivity.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, those who are interested in working with you, where are they at in their writing experience? Are they first-time writers? Is there general? Is it all across the board? What does someone who will be working with you look like?
I am right now, I'm creating new packages. I was coaching hour by hour, but then I've realized like people need my expertise to guide them. So if they're totally new and just ready, just have an idea, then I'll work with them on Zoom where we talk about their idea. And then I'll send them some prompts tailored to what they're looking for. Then maybe they're advanced, maybe they have a chapter or a story, something done, and they want me to read that and give them feedback and talk about how to move forward. I'll also give them prompts for that. But then I also have people who've written a whole book and want the whole book reviewed. They want someone else to have it in their heart and brain. And so I'll read that for them. They'll give me a list of questions, things they're worried about. And then I respond to that. And I also just show them what their book looks like, what the symbols are, what the themes are, where the gaps are. So each one of those is sort of a different level, but because my goal is getting everyone who is the tiniest bit interested in writing, I have something for each different sort of level they're on.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. Anyone who has an idea and a desire or a curiosity to someone who's already completed a book and looking for some review. So while we're in different industries, we do have a common style, or at least a common, I feel like, most heart-centered approach. And while I'm working on creating businesses and you're creating out books, the deeper work is healing hearts and minds and in the people that we're working with and those people that they affect. So from the healing, almost the esoteric experience of what you're creating, how do you see that? How does that fill your world and come out through your work?
I love that. I love that idea. I love thinking about that idea. And I think it is becoming a whole being. Part of what creative writing and creativity do is they give you an opportunity to really understand who you are, what you've been through, where you've been, it doesn't even matter what genre you're working in, because everything that you do informs the language that you choose, the style that you're writing in. And that wholeness, it's like we're walking around, a lot of us are walking around with big chunks missing, or things we don't understand, like big mysterious whirls that we're like, I don't even know what that whirl is in my brain, but it's there. But becoming more aware of who you are and what you've been through and owning it. That's the part about writing that really helps, is it allows people to own it. This is my story. I'm writing it down. I am the one putting it here into the world, sharing it with the world. And there is something so profound in that ownership and that self-acknowledgement that creates a powerful, like then we're dealing with a whole being. We're not dealing with someone who has all these terrible or difficult moments in their life just still raging and influencing things they do. You're instead working with somebody who can arrive with all of their faculties intact and clear, and just being able to have a tool. So every time something difficult happens in my life, I turn to writing. I just immediately turn to writing now. And so it's a tool for healing in that way. It is number one, my tool for healing.
And correspondingly, I feel there's such a high level, high baseline, if you will, of anxiety within our society. I think it's at unprecedented levels. And in the healing circles and work that I do, not only with the coaching, but in the other realms, I've seen that where people are so anxious and they're concerned about feeling unsafe. And it's such a trap. And just to share a little bit of my perspective and see if you concur, is feeling unsafe is a trap that holds them in the place. So I don't feel safe taking a risk to leave my job, to start a business. I don't feel safe. What if I write a book and it's failed? Or what if I hurt someone's feeling? Or what if it doesn't work out? It's like this all unsafe. And they're like, well, I can't start because I'm not safe. When there's actually a subtle shift to actually you're uncomfortable. And the unsafeness is what, kind of the psychobabble thing. Well, you got to feel safe. I got to do this. No, it's like actually growth comes through sometimes through being uncomfortable. And how can you guide someone to see the difference, but then to realize that once you feel uncomfortable and you've moved through it, that discomfort is pretty much gone.
Oh,
And you
it's
can go
gone.
to a next level, but it's that first step or two to get someone out of feeling unsafe into realizing that it's a discomfort. Do you see that in your writers, and how do you address that if it does come up?
I mean, all the time. That's the fear, actually, that I think I was talking about at first. And, the thing is that safety is, and this actually goes back to the pandemic too. It's an illusion most of the time, anyways, right? The Buddhist precept that change is the most essential quality of life. Like, that's why people hate change, because it feels so uncomfortable. But and it is true, when you start putting something on the paper, you're exposing your thoughts, right? You're exposing your ideas. You're hoping someday to contact someone, to reach someone with your writing. And it is, I am a risk taker by nature. Just that is who I am. That's part of why I was able to make this great change for my own life, save my own life, honestly. And
Mhm.
so what I do, almost more than talking someone through that, I model it and I take them through it. I show them what it is like for them to write. I give people prompts all the time that they have to write to. Maybe they have 5 minutes, maybe they have 10 minutes, and they're like, ah! And then they do it. And then they do it. And then they become more accustomed to it. And they realize that it's a way of shortcutting all the overthinking we do in our brain, and they can access something more pure and authentic from themselves. So I really like just modeling how to just start is part of is the real true way forward on that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, and we need more of that, more of the risk taking, more of the taking chances, because writing something down on paper will probably never cause you any physical harm. I
Right.
think it's probably a safe bet that you could try it, just
You
like
could
writing some
always
content.
crumple it up and throw it
Right.
out. No one has to see it. I used to be afraid that I would die when my terrible first draft was there, and that people would think that was the best I could do. And then I just realized what an elaborate neuroses I had created for myself.
It's very enjoyable. You can write a story about that one day.
Right?
That could be one of
Totally.
your fairy tales.
Everything could be a story.
Yeah. Well, Frankie, thank you for sharing. It's a great story, and I'm really excited for what you're creating and your students. If if you're interested in learning more about what Frankie shared, you will find her website and how to contact her in all the show notes and in the comments here. And on closing, Frankie, is there anything else you'd like to send the audience off with before we conclude?
I just I I just want them to move forward in an authentic way that feels good to them. That's what I want for them. In whatever form that takes, if it's creative or if it's just on a daily basis. You have permission to be yourselves.
I love that. So there you have it, listeners. Everyone has permission to be themselves, to find their joy, to find their bliss, to confront what's uncomfortable and continue the growth pattern.
Yeah.
So thanks again, Frankie. Thanks for tuning in, and look forward to the next episode coming out shortly.
Thank you for this beautiful conversation, Josh. I appreciate it.